Hello, everyone. My name is Dania. I work at the American Center Tashkent, and it's my pleasure to welcome all of you at our USG AlumniTalks program. We're now live on YouTube and Facebook, so feel free to participate by leaving your questions and comments in the chat boxes, and we will address them to the presenter. And our guest speaker today is Gulnora Bogdalova. Gulnora, thank you very much for accepting to speak here today.
Hi, Dania. Thank you very much for inviting me today.
Let me introduce you to our audience. Gulnora Bogdalova is a Humphrey Program alumna. She's a faculty member at the Department of Psychology at the National University of Uzbekistan, a consultant of the Office of International Affairs, American Psychological Association. She's a part of a global psychology alliance that works on addressing critical global issues such as climate change, access to healthcare, and setting an agenda for psychology through 2025. She's also involved in Learning Leadership Institute initiative that American Psychological Association has co-created with Global Psychology Alliance. And for us today, Gulnora has prepared a very interesting topic about psychology and climate change. Gulnora, I'm turning it over to you and cannot wait to hear about this interesting topic.
Yeah, thank you so much for your introductions and very warm words. So, hello everyone. I'm happy to be with you today. We are going to talk about psychology and what it has to do with climate change. Okay, let's get started. Today, many people are suffering from the result of climate change. It is one of the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and numerous worldwide conferences and summits are dedicated to looking for solutions. You see in the slide, there is a picture of International Summit on Psychology and Global Health, a leader in climate actions that took place in Lisbon in November 2019. So it brought leaders of psychological associations around the world to work on how psychology can, in the best way, contribute to climate change solutions. Psychological science will be included in the upcoming international intergovernmental panel on change assessment report in much more significant ways than in previous assessment. Climate scientists and policymakers are increasingly aware of the need to study the
Oh, I think Gulnora is having internet issues, so we will try to get back to her. Let's watch a short video on the climate change topic.
Talking about climate change can be tough. I mean, it's not like something you can just casually bring up in conversation. But it's such a big, important topic, we can't just ignore it. And while you can't fix climate change all by yourself, you do have the power to affect the people in your life. So let's talk more about climate change. Here's how. First, think about all the things you want to say about climate change. And don't say them. Really. You see, if you just start going off on how bad climate change is, people are probably going to shut down. They may feel attacked and put up their guard. It doesn't matter how eloquent your words are. If the other person's not listening, there's no point. So here's the secret to talking about climate change. Listen. Listen to the other person. I know it sounds weird, but it's the most important part. You may think the goal is to convince the other person of your perspective, but that's going about it all wrong. The goal is just to have an actual conversation, and that only happens when people listen. So, how do you start? First of all, don't ambush people. Get permission first. If they're busy, no need to force it. Just try again another time. Distractions make talking hard. so it's okay to ask to shut devices off. Once you have their attention, start with a question about climate change. Remember to make it about them, not you. Ask about their thoughts and their perspective. When they start speaking, you have one job: just listen. Resist any urge to respond right away. And whatever you do, don't interrupt. This might be the hardest part, especially if you have strong feelings or if the other person is saying something that you disagree with. But trust me on this. Just listen and be open to what they're saying. Now, if the other person doesn't say much, that doesn't mean you can go, okay, they're done, my turn. It's not your turn until you learn something about the other person. So encourage them to say more by asking follow-up questions. Ask about personal experiences. No need to go into science or politics. Reflect back what you hear them say. Repeating and referring to their words lets them know that you are listening, that you care about their point of view. This makes them feel valued and safe. When you earn their trust, they will be more willing to open up and listen to you. So, after they've shared their perspective, then ask if you can tell them about yours. Okay, now it's your turn. What will you say? Remember, the point is not to convince the other person of anything. If you try to do that, they may become defensive and stop listening. Just share what you personally think about climate change. You may not be a climate expert, but you are the expert on yourself. So, tell your story. When did you start caring about climate change? What worries you the most? After you're done talking, ask what they think. Bring it back to them. And, you guessed it, listen. That's what a conversation is, a two-way exchange of ideas. Go back and forth for as long as it feels right. Learn from one another. At the end, thank them for talking and say what you learned from them. This is important. Ending on a positive note makes it more likely that this conversation will happen again. You see, one little chat may not change anyone's life, but it opens the door to more climate conversations in the future. And that's how you build trust. Get others caring about climate change and make a long-term impact. You may be surprised how much you learn in the process too. So, what are you waiting for?
Okay, let's continue your presentation.
Okay, do you see the presentation?
Yes, I see the presentation. Right.
Wonderful. So I hope I stop somewhere here. So the main question of the presentation, what does psychology have to do with the environment? Because we know that psychologists do counseling, provide psychological treatment or psychotherapy, and environment is absolutely different field of study. So how psychology can contribute to the climate change problem solution? And there are at least two fields where psychology can be helpful. So first, if we do not reduce CO2 emission in the future, it will make dramatic impact on the climate and nature. However, people already experience the consequences of climate change, such as floods, violent storms, droughts, extreme heat, and wildfires. Along with firemen, emergency workers, and doctors, psychologists work within teams to help people in emergency situations. Psychologists help survivors, volunteers, and disaster relief workers to cope with stress and strong emotions such as anger and grief. When there are health problems, psychologists can support emotional well-being. Psychologists also can help to build their skills of resilience, to move from feeling of hopelessness that people usually have during the disaster to having a more long-term realistic perspective. So this is first field, and second field is, in addition to supporting individuals with mental health issues, psychology contributes to climate solution by improving communication and changing behavior. To solve environmental problems, we need nature-friendly behaviors. For example, we need to transform from burning fossil fuels, such as oil and coal, to nature-friendly sustainable energy. On a personal level, we can do things to save energy. We can wash towels and clothes less often, take shorter shower, bike and walk instead of driving, be vegetarian, As my daughter was taught at school, if you don't use paper for a year, you will save 7 trees. And if you go vegetarian for a year, you can save 7 million trees. Of course, if you do it alone, there is not much of an impact, but if many people do it, it makes a difference. So Robert Gifford, PhD, a psychologist at the University of Victoria, British Columbia, who studies the interface of environmental, social, and personality psychology, said, climate change is a human problem. It is the result of 7 billion people making decisions every single day. So these make climate change the problem that psychology pay attention to. So why don't people make better decisions? And there are actually many whys. Like ecologically friendly behavior can be more expensive, for example, but sometimes they're not. The underlying problem is actually motivation. So how do we get people to reduce energy used? And psychology suggests that motivation can be influenced with clear communication of the problem. It really makes a difference the way we see reality and how we interpret reality, and what the worldview we have, and this worldview, our attitude, influence on our behavior and the way we act in different situations. So the goal would be to change people's attitude towards climate change as well as their view of nature. Climate change is, and there are several barriers in front of to understand climate change problem. So, for example, climate change is seen as scientific concept and as an abstract problem. It is global, it is distant, it is difficult to understand, and the dangers posed by climate change are intangible or visible in the course of day-to-day life. So psychology think that but a lot of studies was conducted in the field of environmental psychology. And those studies found out that clear, understandable explanation of climate change process is necessary. So psychological studies found that specific words specific words lead to understanding, while others lead to incorrect conclusion. B, metaphors better explain climate change. And in addition, C, messages are more effective when they start with local problems and end with solutions. So let's go through all those points that I mentioned. And first, I mentioned specific words that should be used when we communicate climate change problems. So, for example, we have to use heat trapping gases in our messages and don't use greenhouse gases, because greenhouse gases is like the word greenhouse associated with something positive, with plant, with veggies, and secondly, we should use regular for natural CO2 level and high for extra level of CO2 caused by humans. Thirdly, we have to use word climate change instead of global warming, because global warming is associated with warm weather. That climate change actually causes different changes on our climate, and global warming is just one of these. And very often global warming is associated that we will have always summer, and we will have sand and beaches everywhere, which is not correct, of course. And fourth, we have to use we, not you, because when we try to appeal to people's action towards pro-environmental behavior, because this is global problem, and studies found out that the more effective actions are actions that community-based. When we join as a group to battle the climate or advocate for climate change solutions, it works more effectively. So here the message of Janet Swim, professor at Pennsylvania State University, who studies climate change and sustainability. So she used those words that I mentioned, and moreover, she used metaphor, she compared with a blanket these heat-trapping gases. Let me read this message. So carbon dioxide is one of the heat-trapping gases that surrounds our planet like a blanket. We need a blanket, but not too thin of a blanket. Or while we burn fossil fuels, like when we drive our cars or use electricity produced from fossil fuels, we are producing high level of CO2 that add to regular levels of CO2 already in the atmosphere. This extra CO2 is making that heat-trapping blanket thicker and thicker, causing the planet to get too warm. Okay, so another point that I mentioned is about changing worldview. The way people see reality, the way that people see nature, influence on action, influence on behavior. So the scientists pointed out that it's necessary to facilitate pro-environmental behavior, to change modern industrial view to ecologically grounded worldview. So according to modern industrial view, Earth has plenty of resources, and this view should be changed into ecologically grounded view that Earth's regenerative capacity has limits, actually. The view that a linear take, make, waste economy can continue indefinitely should be transformed into our system must be circular, waste equals food. The view that technology will fix our problems should be transformed into even small manipulations of nature have such system-wide consequences. And the view that efficiency increased profits should be transformed into diversity maintained system integrity. Okay, so the third point that I mentioned about combination of the local problem and the solution. And here that short message tailored to the Uzbekistan nature. So we see in multiple ways how more warmth is causing changes to our climate. Uzbekistan suffers from heat waves, increased droughts, and shortage of water resources. And we can improve our environment by saving energy, changing people's attitude, and switching from fossil fuels to sustainable energy. So in this message, we see that the problem, local problem, and how they can be solved. There is additionally to this point, I can say that the another barrier that any people feel that climate change is too big to solve, and that's why they don't want to do much. But research demonstrates that fear and concern are more effective at producing change when they paired with an optimistic response that the problem is solvable. So here is an example of initiative in Twitter, which calls Ocean Optimism, and it launched in June 2014, spread widely as a flag for stories reporting progress and solving marine conservation challenges. Reaching over 60 million Twitter users since its inception, Ocean Optimism has inspired an international outpouring to marine conservation success stories. And you also see here guidance for women that was produced in Central Asia with the support of World Bank. There are also descriptions, you can easily find it in internet. So there are some recommendation how women can save energy and contribute to climate change solution, which is also very powerful because people recommended, yes, the way how they can contribute to climate change solutions. There is wonderful poster that I found on the Facebook page of American Space, also describing different actions that people can do. And this is really important because it's well pictured. The action described in a short and understandable manner. So this kind of messages are also very effective. Okay, so another research findings in psychology demonstrate that when famous people and leaders talking about climate change, it's also very effective. And as an example, if you, for example, a teacher at university or at school, and you have this lecture about climate change, so using those sources will be very helpful because they're like inspiring and impactful, as research shows. So there is like a video that Julia Roberts performed Mother Nature and Harrison for the ocean. You can like celebrities or leaders, people whom we respect, talk about climate change. It also impacts our behavior. Okay, another research findings. Another studies found out that to motivate pro-environmental behaviors, we can use rewards and incentives such as like bus passes, monetary gain, gifts, and prizes. But however, studies also demonstrated that the effect of incentives is not long-lasting. To ensure significant and long-lasting gains in conservation, studies demonstrate the power of appealing to values. People are motivated to protect children, preserve nature, and build a more sustainable world. As Douglas Macaulay, a professor of ocean science at the University of California, Santa Barbara, writes, "We will make more progress in the long run by appealing to people's hearts rather than to their wallets." And here is the message of Don Montagna, president of International Partners, who just used this approach, appealing to people's values. And I think it will be pretty effective, especially in Uzbekistan, due to high value of family in our country. So let me read this message. Since God gives us dominion over the earth, we are responsible for it. If we don't take care of our land, the consequences will be lower food production. If we don't care of the water, then there won't be enough clean water to drink. If we keep putting pollutants in the air, we will have trouble breathing. If we don't care about the climate, we will get hurricanes, wildfires, droughts, and floods. Nature is our mother. If we damage her, we will damage ourselves because we depend on her for air, water, and soil. To engage the public in pro-environmental behavior, messages about climate change should focus on values, norms of civic responsibility rather than just individual choices. An experimental survey of more than 7,000 US participants demonstrated that stressing protection and responsible management is an effective way to shift attitudes and increase support for the effective policies. This is particularly true when paired with discussions about climate change impact on human health. So I will not read the whole message here because we covered the description of the process of climate change, but I would just pay attention to appealing to human health. Like human health is already being harmed by the increased spread of infection diseases. And due to rising temperatures, we can limit these health problems and avoid worse consequences by reducing the amount of coal and gas we use. So the message also can underline the other impact on human health that climate change causes, such as asthma, increasing asthma, allergies, heat stroke, chronic lung disease, cardiovascular disease, malnutrition, or reduced fitness. Okay, these studies for me is most powerful because I personally experience how important social norm in changing behavior. Like when I was in Europe, my behavior was impacted because people were critical if I used plastic bottles or plastic bags. And like when I returned to Uzbekistan and we went with my daughter to Charvak Reservoir, and we were returning from Charvak to the place where we live, and we decided to collect plastic bottles, and we didn't have bag, we just like carrying them in our hands, and the way people looked at us made me feel embarrassed. Like I realized intellectually that I'm doing right thing, but it didn't feel good. So the more people around us support pro-environmental behavior, the more we're prone to change our behavior. And like you see here the message that was sent in hotel, in Marriott Hotel, and in psychological experiment when both values and social norms were used to change behavior, the magnitude of behavior change increased. When hotel guests were told that most other guests reuse their towels and that most guests approve on conserving energy, they were more supportive to reuse their towels. So effective message for pro-environmental behavior should stress both social norms and social values at the same time. Okay. So many people avoid, talking about climate change brings people's attention and increase awareness about it. The more people will be concerned, the more chances we will have in terms of changing the problem. But many people avoid public advocacy. Most people gravitate towards private, individual behavior and avoid potentially uncomfortable public advocacy and action. But combating climate change requires a transforming system which necessitates participation of public dialogue and activism. Research suggests that effort to increase citizen activism should promote specific beliefs about climate change, that climate change is real, human-caused, dangerous, and solvable, build perception that social activism can be effective, and encourage interpersonal communication on the issue. So you watched already that video. What I like about this video is wonderful, like tips about talking about climate change produced by Hannah Pickard, and she used like psychology counseling skills to make it more effective to convince people. I hope you watch it already and enjoy, and it can be used if you want to talk other people and engage others also in pro-environmental behavior, because the more people involved, the more impact we can make. And as the research shows, the most collective projects on climate change solutions, that project that initiated in school, at universities with students, they are more effective. So I want to end my presentation with words of Barack Obama. We are the first generation to feel the effect of climate change and the last generation who can do something about it. So the biggest challenge that humanity has ever faced is rescuing our planet. The fact that we have caused the damage to our environments means that we can solve it if we act together and promptly. So psychology has an essential role in taking care of people and in crafting messages that inspire people to action. So this is what I have for today, and thank you so much for your attention.
Thank you, Gulnora. Thank you so much for this interesting presentation. So I want to ask you a question about your current projects or your future projects on addressing environmental issues. Can you share a little bit about the projects you work on?
Yeah, thank you very much for your question. Currently, we are doing research with my master degree students who are working on study attitudes among psychologists about climate change. You know, it's like, I remember when I attended this international summit that brought psychologists together, I mentioned in Lisbon, and like president of American Psychological Association, Dr. Arthur Evans, he said, when I started to work in American Psychological Association, I was thinking, oh my goodness, what psychology has to do with climate change? Yes. So it's not like all other people don't understand, but psychologists by themselves don't know very well about psychology contribution. But in fact, the amount of research is significant. When I started to prepare resolution for that summit, I just faced, like, I was thinking, okay, just a couple weeks, I will read all those research. But in fact, there are a lot of them, and it's a long story already of doing this research. And then finally, they found a lot of interesting insights that can be helpful. I'm so happy that psychologists become part of this intergovernmental panel on climate change, and they contribute their knowledge to how to change people's behavior and how to battle the problem of climate change. So this is first project that we are doing with my master's students, and second project that I'm involved in Learning Leadership Institute, that association that initiated by American Psychological Association as a mentor, but my colleagues engaged as mentees. So by the autumn, they have to finish their project, and both of them chose climate change project, and we are doing some projects for students, not only at National University of Uzbekistan, because our department have connection with different departments around Uzbekistan, and I hope we will inspire many students to act in pro-environmental way.
Great, thank you. Speaking about students, we got a comment from Oydin Sabirova, and she's mentioning we should develop sustainable habits in our kids from primary school. This can be a good project to work in collaboration with the Ministry of Public Education.
Yeah, absolutely agree. Thank you so much for your comments. It's a great idea. Actually, I didn't think about it, but I will think with our colleagues from my department.
Do you work with kids?
Currently, we don't. Our attention now on psychologists. Yes, we decided to start with psychologists, but I like the idea, and I think I will think about it. How I can use, for example, for other master students to do research with kids.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Yeah, and Oydin wants to join your projects as a volunteer.
So it's wonderful. Thank you so much, Aydin. You can find me on Facebook like Gulnora Bogdalova, and if you send me a message through Messenger, we will discuss this. And yeah, it's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Oydin. So my next question is about the impact the world on environmental issues. So what is the psychologist's psychologist's main role? Mm-hmm. How psychology can change the world's behavior, people's behavior on the environmental issues?
Yeah, thank you. I like the question that I can answer. Yeah. So as I mentioned that, we make decision every day about, do we choose behavior that it's easier for me, or I choose behavior that will be pro-environmental. Yes. And since we are making decision when we enter the field, when we need change behavior or influence on making decision, we immediately enter in the field of psychology, right? So, and currently psychology try to change people's behavior. Today I discussed, for example, the communication of climate change. But another huge study is dedicated to different programs that can be conducted like in companies and organizations with students, and how we use all those human incentives, like for example, desire to compete or follow social norm. Yes, if we so those programs and communication, two basic fields, how psychology contribute to climate change. That, as I mentioned in my presentation, like crafting messages that explain in simple way the process, because it's really scientific concept, and many people, like I remember when I was like not long time ago when I was preparing for IELTS, and there was a topic about climate change, and I was, my goodness, I cannot understand how it works. Yes, like I know it's horrible, like climate change, but how the process works. So those like using metaphors, as I mentioned, and easy description of the process. There is actually, by the way, like, you know, the whole institute that study how we can communicate different problems, not only climate change, but poverty and global mental health. So it's a huge study within behavioral study and psychology. And like the way, yes, we talk to people about climate change and other problems make really difference in their behavior. And this is how psychology can contribute to climate change solutions.
That's great. Now we know how psychology and environment and climate is connected. This is great to know. Yeah, I think this is last comment from Oyden. She says many thanks to such a productive workshop. I also join to her comment. I want to thank you for this wonderful presentation and accepting being our guest speaker today. Thank you so much, Gulnora. Time flew.
Thank you so much, Aidin, and thank you so much, Danya, for your warm words. And I actually was so happy to be with you today, and thank you so much for having me.
Sure, this video will be recorded and it will remain on our Facebook and YouTube. So anyone who is interested, they might go back and watch it. Thank you. Wish you all the best in your projects, and see everyone on our next Alumni Talks session. Bye-bye.
Great. Bye.